Alright everybody, I decided today to just give sort of an off-the-dome take on Diablo 4. I know a lot of people are talking about it, and a lot of people are ravenously playing it, and it's taken over their entire life. And I'll address that a little bit. It's kind of interesting how we as gamers approach a game like this versus a game like, I don't know, Candy Crush. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But at the start, this is going to be my overview of Diablo 4. To give some pretense, I played one class fully. I played my rogue, and I've leveled him up to level 81, almost level 82. But I don't feel very motivated to continue playing him, and we'll talk about the end game later. But yeah, I've played the rogue class. I haven't tried. There's a couple other. There's sorcerer, there's barbarian, there's... what else is there? This goes to show how, like, I've only been devoted on my one guy. I think this is telling because this game has engrossed me so much that I haven't even, like, there's no peripherals. Like, I want to level up my guy so that he's the best. And for at least up to level 81, I felt completely satisfied and fulfilled in doing that process. Now that I've sort of reached the top end, I kind of want to experiment with the other classes. There's druid. There's not a paladin, which I wish there was one because that was my class in Diablo 2. But yeah, there's a variety of things to choose from if you don't want to just play rogue or wizard or whatever. So to start off in the overview, I think the biggest difference that Diablo 4 has versus the other Diablo games, if you've played those, is that it's an open world Diablo game. I don't know how common this is in the ARPG genre because I'm not crazy sweaty about this genre. It's sort of something that if there are hallmarks, I'll look at them, but I'm not in there playing all of the ARPG likes, you know, it's not really my style. But Diablo 4, it reinvents the Diablo genre into this open world format. And I think it's done an overall really great job. And if I was to grade it on like scale of 0% being unplayable and it makes the game a lot worse, and level 100 is like it's completely revolutionary, it changes the game, it's going to change games forever, I would put Diablo 4's open world at like a 75% because it's suitable. There's not too many complaints I have about the open world. And honestly, the design of the world, the stylization, the way it looks is pretty premier. I've heard some people, I guess let's talk about how the game looks to start off, specifically the open world. Like I've heard some people praise Diablo 4, like this is the best graphics I've ever seen in a game before. I'm like, bro, you can't be serious. I mean, it's pretty good, but it's not going to be remembered in, I don't know, 5-10 years. Like compare that to Red Dead Redemption 2, a game I was playing earlier. Red Dead Redemption 2 still is like the best looking game I've ever seen, and it came out in like 2018. I don't think Diablo 4's graphics are better than Red Dead Redemption 2's, and I think that's partially just because of the style of ARPG games where you're looking down on your character like that. You lose immersion if you're always just looking at the top of your dude's head. What this game does, which is pretty awesome at times, is it'll shift the camera to a more horizontal plane where you can see like a castle or something, but that's also one of my complaints. That is so awesome when they do that, but it's only like probably 6 or 7 times in the whole probably 100 hours you're going to put in your class. But I wish that it was more often, or I wish that you could just toggle it anywhere. That would make it revolutionary for many years if you could do that. But you can't, and it's cool when you can, but if people are telling you to buy this game because of the graphics, then they're smoking something. Like, it's not that cool. I mean, if you compare it to Diablo 3, which a lot of people were addicted to, yeah, it's a massive upgrade. But to the rest of gamers, I think you should understand, like, it's not going to change the industry. It's not industry defining, you know what I mean? But so those are the graphics. The world is crafted really well. You can tell there's some procedural generation in the dungeons, and I think that's intentional because you're going to be redoing those a lot of times. But in the open world, I think it's crafted pretty well. There's a lot to look at. It seems like there's a lot of story and lore and small details to immerse yourself in. There's so many characters. There's so many, side quests and other stuff that you can participate in and get lost in if you so desire. But riding around on your horse is just... it's a pretty pleasurable experience compared to the other Diablo games. I'll be clear about that from the front. Speaking of the horse, yes, you do get a horse in this game. Yes, there's a couple issues with it. Mainly, like, the tracking is pretty bad and it feels very clunky. Like, if there's one stool on the ground and your horse is, like, within a foot of the stool, it's going to completely stop the momentum of your horse, which is very jarring. In most other games, your horse would either push the stool to the side or it would hop over it or something like that. Or it wouldn't change the pathing. You could just sort of go through it. In this game, the collision pattern between the horse and the rest of the geometry in the world, with like rocks and crags and little dips, is pretty terrible. It's kind of tedious is probably the best word to say it. And one thing that will happen is you'll encounter little enemies out in the world. If you are boosting through the enemies, which is an option you can do on your horse, you press spacebar and your horse will go faster for a little bit of time. If you're boosting through, you can run through enemies. But if you're just walking, your horse will just sort of stand there. It's not very immersive because you're trying to move, but then you'll just fall off your horse because apparently the enemies scared the horse or you or whatever. One thing that the enemies do, which is really annoying, is they'll put up little barricades in the open world that will force you to either go around them or hop off your horse and fight the little enemies. And I honestly just think the horse needs a jump button so that you can get over them. If you want to be a big brain, you can say the developers want you to engage with the little mob enemies and fight them out in the open world. And that's why they put the barriers up so that you're forced to make a decision and get on foot. But, I'm running to a dungeon where I can fight enemies in a more condensed area. I don't really want to participate in like 2 or 3 mobs that are just holding up the barricade. It's not worth it for the experience or whatever. But overall, if I were to rate the transportation, you can fast travel, you can ride your horse, you can walk, you can dash, you can do all this stuff. I think it's overall a very positive thing, but the more you play this game, the more I think the flaws manifest themselves to you, and it's harder to appreciate the good stuff. So I just want to go out and praise the open world's really awesome. It's very cool. It's very large. It's a humongous map, but it's pretty cool. Before Diablo 4 actually launched, they had some betas, which you probably are familiar with, and it was limited to one region. And I was kind of worried because it was snowy. It's kind of like in Elden Ring. There's that final part of the map where everything's just like snowy, and it's kind of bland, honestly. I like snow regions, but if it's the only thing you're seeing, it gets tiresome, like Elden Ring is, And what happens is you uncover the other parts of the map. You see these different types of regions. There's the desert, there's a more foresty area, and it's pretty awesome. If you get close to the coast, you'll see shipwrecks and stuff like that. And while I think the variety of topography could be better, I think it's doable. It's manageable, and it's something that I'd like to praise for a second. It's good and it gets the job done. It's not something I complain too much about. In future expansions, obviously you want to see more types of regions and biomes and zones and stuff. Especially if we don't really go to hell as a region in this Diablo game, which that might sound weird if you've never played Diablo before, but to the sweaty Diablo veterans, not being able to go to hell is ridiculous. That's where a lot of people have great memories of farming demons, but I'm sure that will be in the next expansion or something. Time will tell, I guess. The open world's great. To circle back and, provide my gripes or my criticisms of the open world and my fatigue with this genre, I don't know if it's just me, but I'm so tired if walking up to the exclamation point NPC, clicking on them, the quests that you don't really care about gets added to your little log, and you go around and collect all these quests when you're in town, and you open up your log once you're out in the open world trying to explore, and it's just like this list of chores for you to do. Like, none of them mean anything. It's just a list of little chores. There's no better word. I can't imagine there's people that enjoy, farm 25 vials of blood in this one region and go give them to this characterless NPC so you can get your XP boost. I swear, like, doing the side quests for me, my biggest motivation was just so that I wouldn't have to look at the quest in my book anymore. I was just so tired of it. It's not that they're meaningful. It's not that they're memorable. It's not that they're even fun to do, really. You're just trying to get rid of them. All those little side quests are a hassle. And me personally, I'm not a fan of them. I think that it felt pretty dated based on some other games I played. I think about Ghost of Tsushima, where it's not like this little exclamation point. It's very immersive. The wind will guide you to where you need to go. And I like that sort of philosophy with side quests a lot more than that is here in Diablo 4. But, it's not going to ruin your experience, I don't think. I think Diablo 4 is still good besides that. But it is tedious. The open world is probably the most defining factor about this game. And it's arguable if this is going to be defining for years and years and years to come, because I think pretty much every gaming genre is trying to move to this new open world format, and I'd argue it doesn't work for a lot of genres, but it seems like they pulled it off here at least decently enough. For the rest of the game, I don't think that the mechanics are fleshed out beyond Diablo 2's. I don't think it's fleshed out that much more, but it's done well, and it's done well enough. It's up to you as a consumer to say, do I want to play something that's nothing I've ever seen before, or do I just want to play something that's decent? It's like, for me, when it comes to watching a TV show or a movie, I've already seen the basic stories I've seen before. I already know these characters once you see them for a minute on the screen. And it's like these tracks that you go to because you've seen them so many times. I think Stranger Things is a perfect example of this. I don't know if there's any other Diablo 4 reviews talking about Stranger Things, but this is just what my mind is thinking of. Like, it seems like Stranger Things is just like a good show all around, but what is it doing that's breaking new ground? Probably nothing. I mean, there's decent characters, the storyline seems kind of interesting. And so for me, I don't really care about Stranger Things. Maybe that's going to offend somebody, but you shouldn't get offended if I say I don't like a piece of media. It's just, another example is Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like, I already know he's the chosen kid. I already know he's going to win at the end. I like seeing things that are new. I like seeing things that, change the way I think about the world and the way I think about processes. And so with Diablo 4, if you've never played an ARPG before, then yeah, it will probably be new and revolutionary to you, which it is for some players. I'm sure there's a fair amount of people that have never played a game like this before, and you can absolutely get sucked in and think it's amazing. But for a lot of other people, we're pretty familiar with the tracks or these pathways or these trends, and it's arguable if this is defining enough or new enough to warrant playing besides those other games. A game that everybody's freaking talking about that I haven't played is Path of Exile. Oh, Path of Exile does this so much better. The end game is way better. A lot of people haven't played Path of Exile. A lot of people have played Diablo and Diablo 4. So I don't really like the comparison with other games. I like the comparison of the own series, the Diablo series. And so if you're familiar with the Diablo series, I think this game adds like maybe 10 to 25% more and sort of redefines and shapes it up 10 to 25% better than the previous entries. But it's not revolutionary. It's not going to be remembered against other things. I think we also have to address the fact that this is a quote live service game, and this brings in this whole other layer of controversy, I think, because previously, I guess I'm going to explain what the heck a live service game, but I'm sure a lot of people know. Pretty much since Fortnite, a lot of games have moved to be live service because they've realized that people actually like sticking with an IP or with a game as long as it continues to be interesting, as long as it continues to remain interesting. Fortnite did this. Another example is Apex Legends, both like FPS games. Actually, Fortnite is not an FPS. It is a third-person shooter. But anyways, the intention is that the developers continue to change the game and innovate as time goes on, okay? And that is what they want to do with Diablo 4. I think they sort of did this in Diablo 3, like later on, maybe not at launch. I'm not really sure how that worked, but what is supposed to be happening is that the game radically changes as time goes on, or at least changes enough to be interesting to the player for 1 year out, 2 years out, 3 years out, 4 years out, because people like staying and building on their characters. They like the world, they want to continue participating in it. I think, hot take here, I think this could be cool, but I'm also very hesitant and worried because it also comes with so many freaking downsides. If you were to read the room and talk to all the World of Warcraft heads out there, that game is like one of the oldest. I think I would consider it a live service game. They pay a monthly subscription for it and they buy expansions. And it all sort of builds on the central World of Warcraft story campaign or whatever. There's new campaigns. But I think a lot of them would argue that the longer this live service process goes on, the worse these systems become. And I don't know if I've ever seen a game successfully pull off live service for 5 years, 10 years. And so at the end of that 10 years, if you're left with a worse product than just the base game, it goes on to ask the question, it wards the question is a better way to say it. Was it even worth it to do live service, regardless of how they made so much more money? And I know we could just end the discussion now, oh yeah, the developers want to make the most money, so they're going to do that thing. Yeah, that's obvious. I don't think that's very insightful. I'm more interested in the artistry, the craft of the video game, the quality of the video game, not just what brings in the money, okay? In a realistic perspective of the world, Diablo 4 does have cosmetics that you can buy, you can pay for. Yeah, people are going to do that. That's why Blizzard implemented them. They're going to make money off of that. I'm not interested in that discussion. I know it's real. I know that's relevant. I don't find that interesting. And they talk about the artistry of the game, the review of the game. In Diablo 4, to hone it in a little bit, there are transactions that you can do on the side. But what I like is that it's not pushed in your face all the time. Not once in the entire game, is like a weird currency propped in your face that de-immerses you from the story of the game, whatever you're doing. You're never going to be like, oh, you got to buy platinum. You got to buy, you got to buy 1,000 idols so that you can buy this weapon. It's not like that. You can play the entire game and pretty much not even look at the other transactions you could make with real money. And I think that's praiseworthy, especially compared to the horrendous crimes of Diablo Immortal, which you probably are familiar with. There's not like really microtransactions in this game. How it is set up is when you go to click on your character in the startup menu, there's also a tab that says shop, and it has a little exclamation point next to it. And there's something psychological about that makes you want to click on it. But if you don't participate in that, you don't even have to click on the shop. You could just click start game and you can go to your character and you can have fun and play and not even be thinking about the cosmetic system. The only other way you're thinking about cosmetics is if you see somebody else walking around with a cool skin and then you click on it and see that it's obviously just a paid cosmetic. That's the only other time you're thinking about it. In Diablo 4, it's really not bad. It's not bad, and I would say it's even probably good. It's there if people really, really want to spend money, but for the actual smart consumers, you're not going to do it, and it's not in your face. So I think it's probably a very, very good compromise, especially when you compare it, like I said, to Diablo Immortal and World of Warcraft, two of the most horrendous freaking microtransactional games I've ever seen in my life. Diablo 4 is very good. So yeah, it is still yet to be seen whether or not this will be worth it at the end of the day, because it is up to the developers to continuously make decisions. And well, I do recommend Diablo 4 right now. If it's 5 years from now, I might say like, hey guys, this is horrible. Don't waste your time with it. Right now, I would recommend it. Again, you're going to at least get 100 hours of really, really fun and engaging content, in my opinion. Okay, so we covered the world, which is pretty great, I would say. Pretty good. We covered the paid microtransactions, which it's there if you want it. It's not there if you don't want it. That's how I see it, which is, it's fine. The biggest thing about the game, I would say, is the combat, which is kind of obvious, and the fundamental gameplay loop that Diablo 4 presents. And we're going to spend a little bit of time here. And when I say a little bit, I mean a lot, because that's what a lot of the game is combat. In the background of this video, I'm probably going to have just some mindless freaking grind gameplay. And you watch this and you'll see that it kind of doesn't look that fun if you're watching it. And I think that's completely fair. I never watch other people play Diablo. I never watch other people in their run-throughs of the game, because it's freaking boring watching somebody else play these types of games. I don't know why. I just know that is the case for me, in my eyes at least. But you have to be truthful and honest, and I am being. It is so fun when you're actually the one behind the driver's seat. It's so fun when you're actually the one, grinding the mobs into a pulp, getting them all into this little condensed area, and then electrocuting all of them at once. It's so fun and it's so satisfying. And while Diablo 4 is not perfect, I don't know if any game is perfect in their combat. I think this game is very, very fun and does its job pretty dang well. If I were a business manager and I had a team of employees and one of my employees was named Diablo 4 Combat, he would definitely not be fired. He's doing a great job. He can keep it up. There's some things, maybe he could turn his reports in a little bit quicker. Maybe he's better in working with the team, but he's doing a great job. He's one of my best workers. He's doing exceptional. And so, like I said earlier, I've only really explored the rogue class, and it is really, really fun. There's a lot of options you can do with combat. And from what I understand with the other classes, Druid, Barbarian, etc., they all are well designed and are fun. In my eyes, it doesn't seem like there's one class that's just like terrible and unfun to play. I think you can get a good amount of enjoyment out of all of them. If you are a hardcore sweaty player, you'll probably be looking at the stats and realize, I don't know, seems like the Barbarian's hitting a little low here in this boss fight. But it kind of balances out because the Barbarian, is good at clearing dungeons out quicker, stuff like that. This game, there's a lot of depth, a lot of fun with whatever class you pick. So that's one of the biggest reasons I would recommend it to you. And I mentioned this earlier, but the fun part of the game for me is building your class. It's not just the combat, because fundamentally, there's like 5 spells or 5 abilities you can equip on your character at any time. Maybe one of them's a dash, maybe one of them is like an electrocute, maybe one of them is just a basic melee attack. And so these 5 combinations of abilities is there, and that's fun. But the fun part is when you align and synergize the abilities with other abilities. Every class has 5 basic skills. It might be just 4 basic skills, actually. And then the tree branches out and you can pick 5 abilities to work with those abilities. It might be 4, I'm not really sure. And then branching off of that, you can pick another group of, on the rogue, the next one is the agility. So like you could pick a dash, you could pick caltrops, and then off of that little branch, you could pick more stuff, like maybe a poison trap. Or the second to last one is your ultimate ability, which you can pick. There's like 3 or 4 of them to choose from. And then the very last one is a pretty defining like class perk. And this changes for every different character in the game. So I'm being kind of broad because it is very broad. And this is where probably the most fun comes in, is tuning which abilities work best with which other abilities and how much damage can I do in a format of a dungeon or in the open world or even fighting a boss. And so when you're changing out these abilities, it almost turns into like this puzzle game where you're trying to synergize different aspects with other aspects. And so that is the first big draw of Diablo. It's really fun. It's awesome. And I think it's pretty accessible too. There are other games in the genre where it's literally like you have to read an encyclopedia to understand what's going on with all these stats and resistances and all this stuff that you can be up to your nose and freaking reading boring stuff. Diablo 4 strikes a very nice middle ground where it's accessible and you don't have to go through too many other websites to simply enjoy participating in the game. So I think that's commendable and I like that a lot. That's like the first half of the combat. The other part is like when you use these abilities, you kill enemies obviously, and those enemies drop loot. And it's not very simple loot. The loot is maybe the most, probably the second most in-depth aspect of the game, because what will happen is, you kill a demon over here, he drops a chest plate and the drop is randomized, but what's on the chest plate is not just like 30 defense or something like that. It'll be like 300 defense, but it'll also have these little bullet points underneath that grant this chest plate an enchantment or a special ability. They call them affixes. And if you played Minecraft, which I'm sure everybody has, it's like if you had sharpness 3 on your sword versus having knockback on your sword, and that randomized loot drop makes it so fun. And it's like you're gambling, but without the negative aspects of gambling, obviously, or you're not paying money to get loot. So, this one demon drops this chest plate that grants you an extra dash with your regular dash. And so you can go, maybe I could make a build, or I could make a type of character that works around having 2 shadow steps instead of just 1. Or maybe the sword that you picked up makes it so you have, after hitting somebody 3 times, your critical strike damage goes up by 30%. And then you can go, maybe I could build a class that is based around me putting out very fast attacks so that I can hit that critical strike enchantment very often, And so all your pieces of armor will have one main enchantment at the end of the game. And the variety of pathways you can go with this is pretty great. Obviously, if you're a min-max or gameplay dude, you can go to YouTube and type in what's the best, most DPS damage, and then you can build a class around that. And I bet those people have fun doing that. For me, the fun part was finding out what is the best for my style of gameplay, and then how the campaign or how the mobs I encounter challenge and force me to change my class and my gear and my abilities. That was the fun part to me, like the sort of puzzling aspect of the combat. So for an example, maybe you'll run into a boss that it's just one dude, he outputs a crazy amount of damage, and you're like, okay, I need to build something that targets one guy. What's really good at evaporating one single dude standing there? But then maybe a couple dungeons later or throughout the campaign, the boss will spawn in little minions around you, and you have to figure out, okay, how can I change my build to also, challenge and fight those little mobs that he summons and also eviscerate the boss? And so it sort of depends on the area. This is an interesting comparison, but Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, you'll be forced to build a different machine to solve the issue based on the parts that you have in your inventory. I need to fly this gem over to this other platform, so I need to use the airplane, hot air balloon, maybe the fans or the rockets or whatever. Imagine that. But in Diablo, it's like, I need to use this ability because I need to take out the minions. I need to use this ability so that I can dodge the AoE attack of the boss. And that is sort of the puzzle aspect of it that I really, really enjoy. And I think it should be said that this is not just a simple huddle level of thinking and engaging with. Like, there's a vast amount of decisions and choices you can make to optimize your build, and that's what's fun. If it was shallow, if it was easy as, okay, this guy has minions, so that means I have to use this one ability, it's not like that. There's a good amount of depth and a good amount of balance between even just one class and different ways you can play it, and then against all the classes and ways you can approach it. There's a lot of stuff you can do, and I don't think that should be understated. And the other side of combat is where you're actually going to be fighting. Like I mentioned mentioned earlier, maybe you're in the overworld on your horse and you see a pack of mobs and there's an event indicator nearby, or it's some sort of challenge you need to complete to get a chest or get some rewards, and you can choose to participate in that. A lot of the other combat happens when you actually sort of leave the overworld and go into a dungeon, which I'm guessing is beneath the earth, obviously. And you can actually see it's really cool. Like, you'll enter this little shack, and then this like gigantic cavern will be underneath with like thousands of freaking mobs where you need to kill them and complete some sort of quest that usually just revolves around going through the dungeon and then fighting the boss at the end. There are some nuances and some other subtleties and other sort of changing gameplay loops that happen within dungeons, but for the most part, you're just going to be going through and then clearing a boss out at the end. And it's pretty fun. It's pretty great. I think if you were to think about things thematically, I think it would have been a lot cooler if there was actually some sort of a difference between the mobs you fight in the overworld versus the mobs you find in the dungeons. I know if you're going to have this conversation with a Diablo sweaty man, he's just going to be like, no, I want the best mobs all the time with the most XP. But, if you approach this thematically and from a story perspective, I would like to see some sort of disparity in tones between the overworld and the actual dungeons, and that is not there. The only time it is there is there's this event that happens later on in the game called Hell Tides, where you'll walk into an area and pretty much a filter gets put on the game and it will start raining blood, and these like crazy scary demons are out and about wandering around, and it dramatically changes the tone of whatever the area you're walking through is, and you can obviously get better loot because it's a harder area to clear. That is so awesome, and I wish there was some sort of gap or disparity in just the regular overworld and the mobs you find in dungeons, because as of right now, there's not really a change. The only difference is that you're going to find a condensed amount of mobs underground than in the open world, and I think that there's things to be desired from that. An example is like an Elden Ring. You're never going to find those little ant mobs that are in the underworld, those gigantic ants. You're never going to find those walking around on the grassy fields of Lingrave, and I think thematically that's very appropriate, and I like that. I think that adds to the identity that the open world has. I talk about Elden Ring a lot because a lot of people have actually played that game, so if you haven't, you could apply that to a lot of other open world games. Red Dead Redemption 2, you're going to find a certain amount of people that look a certain way in Armadillo, but if you go down to like some of the hick parts and whatever that freaking swamp city is, they're going to act and look and behave differently. That's not really the case in Diablo 4, and I think world identity is lost because of that. I want to be clear because I guess for getting into the nitpicky stuff, if you go to the desert region, there are going to be a certain set of different mobs than in the snowy region, yes. So I guess that is a plus towards Diablo 4. What I'm talking about specifically is once you go into a dungeon, and it seems like there's any sort of mob that can be thrown in your face. It doesn't really even matter on like what the type of the dungeon is. There's certain, different types of the way the dungeon looks. Seems like you could just encounter anything anywhere. And some people, I bet, are happy about that and don't really care. But I would like to see some sort of a identity towards the dungeon. That's my perspective. Because, there's people that are out there that are just grinding the dungeons. They don't even hardly even think about what mobs they're killing. They're just out there to get the experience. Which, to be fair, the gameplay and the loop sort of pushes you to do that. Because you just want to get the gear as fast as you can, You don't really care about the story of the characters or anything. But I think it's fair for me to say that the game could be better if I had some sort of cognitive realization that the enemies I'm fighting are here for this reason and this story. I think that would be better. But overall, whether it's in the overworld, whether you're fighting a boss, whether you're in a dungeon or a nightmare dungeon, which is something at the end of the game, or whether you're in a Helltide or in a story mission, the combat is all pretty dang fun, and unless you're doing hands-on, you probably don't understand this. But like I said, if you give it a try, you're going to have a lot of fun once you adapt to it and start changing out your abilities. It's wide and it's deep, and there's a lot of stuff you can do, and I certainly recommend that. And so for most people, I would say, you're playing this game sort of casually. That's what you're going to experience. Maybe you'll do 1 or 2 classes, and you're going to have so much fun tinkering with these classes, getting loot, and repeating this process over and over again. I certainly recommend it. Another conversation actually opens up once you get past, these, I hate using the word casual because at the end of the day, we're all gamers, but people that spend more time with the game versus those that, log in for a little bit every little bit just to check it out. There's people that grind this game for, 12 hours a day. And those are the people that are asking, okay, what about the end game? That's the word. The end game of Diablo 4 is bad. It sucks. There's nothing to do. And this is a whole nuanced discussion because there's different targets of people that this game is trying to attract. Yes, there's people that have an hour to play the game every week, and those people will have fun. Yes, there's people that play this game 100 hours every week, and you want those people to have fun. For the people that have 100 hours a week to play this game, this part of the video is more towards you. The end game is lackluster, and specifically between the levels of, I would say, level 75 to level 100, there's really nothing there for you to do that you haven't done already. There's not crazy cool, unique items that are going to change the way that you play the game. There's not crazy cool, super end game bosses that are going to radically change the way you set up your build. There's not really that going on here in Diablo 4, unfortunately. I think later on, maybe they'll be able to include some stuff for that. That's completely up to the developers, not up to me. But later on, we might see some improvements to the nightmare dungeons, to the way that Helltide operates, to the way that a lot of things operate. You know, for example, if you're not familiar already, at the very end of the game, there's this boss called Uber Lilith. And Lilith is like the main bad chick of the game, and you end up killing her in the campaign. But in the World Tier 4, which is like the hardest difficulty at the moment, you get the opportunity to fight a revamped Echo of Lilith. I don't really know what the lore is, but for some reason she's back, and she's crazy, and she's freaking hard, and she pretty much one-shots you with everything. But she is a level 100 mob. Okay, that is something that's very, very scary, because pretty much every single one of her fast moves will one-shot your character. I don't think I've seen any builds that can withstand anything from her, unless you're using exploit. And so there is that at the end that you can work towards. That's like literally the only end game grind that seems like you might get some fulfillment or satisfaction from. But the problem with the end game with Uber Lilith is that she doesn't even drop like a crazy item that's going to change your game or something. She doesn't drop anything that you couldn't just get from completing a dungeon. So the question is there, why would I want to torture myself and go through this extremely tedious boss fight? I'm pretty sure nobody thinks it's fun. It's just every single move one-shots you. Dark Souls does a great job of making the fight actually fun, but it would not be fun if every time Margit threw a dagger at you, it just instantly killed you. That would not be fun. That's how Uber Lilith is. And so I don't think there's very much fulfillment in actually fighting her, and she doesn't even drop anything, so why would somebody even try to do that? I'm almost certain that's going to be changed in the patches, so probably her damage will probably be decreased, and maybe her health, and maybe it'll be a higher chance for her to drop like an ultra elite to rare item in the game, and maybe that's something people will want to work towards. But it is a genuine slog from levels like 70 to 100, because there's not really anything meaningful to do that you haven't already done. Yes, you can progress and do higher and higher nightmare dungeons, but I'm telling you, if you've done Nightmare Dungeon like 5 or 10, I don't know which one it starts at, then you've already done Nightmare Dungeon 90. The only difference is that the mobs start doing more damage and they have a lot more health. There's more affixes and like curses on the dungeon, but it's not like you're actually going to a new place. And so for me, in my eyes, that's not very rewarding. The only thing that's good about it is that it guarantees like a legendary item at the end, but it's just, once you already have all the legendaries and the builds that you want, you don't really need to grind for more legendaries. There's nothing else there for you. And so if you're an endgame gamer, what's the difference between enjoying 100 hours and enjoying 5,000 hours? You're not going to enjoy 5,000 hours of this game. I'm going to be real with you. But you are going to enjoy like between 1 and 300 hours if you try out the different classes. And so I've talked a ton of negative things about this game. I've mentioned a lot of my gripes, which I think it's useful to the developers so they can see what problems I have. But this game deserves so much praise because of how much it engrossed me for the time that I played it. Literally, when Tears of the Kingdom came out, I was engrossed in that game for like 2 or 3 days, stay up at night playing it. With Diablo 4, I've stayed up so many nights grinding and playing and having fun that it's kind of ridiculous. And so while I'm sure that Tears of the Kingdom will probably get Game of the Year, and I think it deserves that, Diablo 4 has definitely taken up more of my time, and I've been more fulfilled with it for longer, and I think it's really, really praiseworthy for that. The whole Game of the Year discussion is way different. I don't even want to talk about that in this video, but Diablo 4 completely engrossed me and made me really look forward to gaming when I came home. Made me really, really want to hop on and play with the boys. It's awesome for that, and I totally recommend it. If you're looking to spice it up and change, what's the game of this season? Diablo 4 is probably the game of this season. I don't know, it seems like Final Fantasy is also the game of the season for a lot of people, but I've heard some negative things about that one. That's a different discussion for a different day. Diablo 4 is awesome. I hope that as it is a live service game, like I said, I hope that they add and change it and completely fix and remedy these problems I've addressed. And I think it has the potential to do that. I also see the potential of them messing things up, adding in more microtransactions and making this game a slog. I also see that happening, like what happened with World of Warcraft. I see it both ways. But if you were to hop in right now, I'm sure you would have like a ton of fun with it. I recommend it. It's also very fun in group play. I can speak for that. If you're trying to find something to play with your homies, this game's pretty awesome for that too. Or if you're just solo, it's pretty great. So Diablo 4, I don't think it's fair to just give a game a number, but I will do that, don't worry. Because like a 10 out of 10 in a Diablo game is so different from a 10 out of 10 in a, I don't know, Mario game, that people start comparing it like, oh, you gave a 9 to Mario, you gave Elden Ring like a 6, what the heck's going on here? In the scale of the Diablo series, I think that's what I will limit to. I think Diablo 4 is the best Diablo game for most gamers yet. I think if you are a hardcore sweaty player trying to grind for the rest of your life, it would probably be Diablo 2, okay? But for most people, this is the best Diablo game. It's the best way to dive into the series if you've never played it before. But also, if you have played it before, you're going to have fun with this game for a long time. So I think it's a win on both fronts. It seems like they favored the casuals a little bit with this entry in the series, but there is potential there for people to grow and to continue to appreciate this game as time goes on. So my overall recommendation of Diablo 4, I think I would give it a solid 8.5 to 9 out of 10. There's enough gripes and enough grievances, I would bump it down, a notch or a notch and a half. But I think I'm hopeful towards the future because it seems like the developers are listening to the player base. And it seems like they're making meaningful changes, or they're planning to make meaningful changes as the seasons happen. We will see in the future for sure. But overall, those are my off the dome thoughts of Diablo 4. I'm so engrossed in this community. I'm so engrossed in hearing what people's opinions are. I watch hour-long videos of people talking about the end game. I watch videos of everything because I love this game ultimately, and I highly recommend it. And I'm looking forward to this discussion now and in the future with this game and forward Diablo games. So thank you so much for watching if you've got this far. I really want to hear your takes on it. Hopefully I didn't offend you too much by saying Stranger Things was a mid and I don't really care about it, or Avatar: The Last Airbender. But I was trying to illustrate my point. Thanks so much for watching, and whatever game catches my eye next time, I think I'll make a video on that and give my thoughts on that one too. But until then, thank you so much and have a good one.